And I think with our little secret, we're going to do really well with the House, right? Our little secret is having a big impact.
Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people.
Late last year, they ruled former President Donald Trump was ineligible to appear on the presidential primary ballot. The decision was ultimately struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court in a unanimous vote, but the initial decision made national headlines.
Escalating anti-voting measures. With early voting already underway and over 50 million ballots cast, the Republican Party has intensified efforts to restrict voting access and challenge election outcomes. This election cycle, the GOP's approach appears to be an extension of tactics previously employed by former President Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 election results, including disinformation campaigns, legal challenges, and attempts to interfere in the certification of electoral college votes. Trump, in collaboration with House Speaker Mike Johnson, hinted at a strategy to contest the 2024 election if he loses, referring to it as their little secret.
And Speaker Mike Johnson is here, and he's doing a great job. Great job. We think he's great. And he's going to be around for a long time, I predict. And I think with our little secret, we're going to do really well with the House, right? Our little secret is having a big impact.
Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people. Hard work is joyful work. And make no mistake, we will win.
The GOP has lodged over 130 election-related lawsuits, aiming to influence the outcomes of the upcoming elections. Many of these cases target which ballots get counted, often with conservative justices showing a greater willingness to back GOP arguments, despite broad consensus that some actions conflict with the federal and constitutional laws. An emblematic example of the judiciary's involvement is the Supreme Court's recent ruling allowing Virginia to purge its voter rolls of suspected non-citizens, a decision that could disenfranchise over 1,600 voters close to Election Day, disproportionately impacting people of color. This decision reflects how the judiciary's influence, especially with conservative majorities, could sway the election in crucial swing states and potentially alter the trajectory of the 2024 presidential race. The court's decision in Virginia also challenges the Purcell principle, a legal doctrine advising against changes to election laws immediately before an election. Originally established in 2006, the Purcell principle has seen inconsistent application in recent years, often with partisan motivations. Voting rights experts, such as Wilfred Codrington III, have criticized the doctrine's use in unpredictable and outcome-driven ways, suggesting that it undermines its intended role in promoting electoral stability. Focused legal challenges. Most GOP legal challenges this election cycle focus on provisional ballots and mail-in ballots, both of which have become vital for ensuring voting accessibility, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. On October 25th, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled against counting ballots that arrive after Election Day, even if they were mailed beforehand. This policy, used in 18 states and Washington, D.C., could face legal challenges that might limit mail-in voting options further. For now, this ruling affects only Mississippi, but could set a national precedent if further cases arise. Federal judges, however, recently rejected 2 GOP-led challenges intended to purge voter rolls and restrict overseas voting processes. The Republican National Committee and North Carolina Republicans had sought to disqualify around 225,000 voters over eligibility concerns and implement additional vetting for overseas ballots, potentially delaying their counting. The Supreme Court also denied an emergency appeal by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to remove his name from the ballot in 2 swing states, a decision that benefits the Democratic Party by avoiding voter confusion. These rulings highlight the ongoing battles in lower courts, where judges have generally maintained the status quo, preserving the rights of tens of thousands of eligible voters who might otherwise have been disenfranchised. However, the Supreme Court's decisions in the Virginia case and a pending Pennsylvania petition suggest that the court may still intervene in ways that affect voting rights significantly, both in the current election and beyond. Long-term effects on voting rights. A critical case from Pennsylvania awaits a decision that could influence how provisional ballots are handled. The Republican National Committee has petitioned the Supreme Court to overturn a state ruling that permits voters to cast a provisional ballot if their mail-in ballot is rejected for technical reasons, such as missing a secrecy envelope or a date. Pennsylvania's Supreme Court affirmed that voting laws are designed to enable, not hinder, citizens' right to vote, a perspective challenged by the RNC's emergency appeal. Should the Supreme Court rule in favor of the GOP in Pennsylvania, it could result in thousands of ballots being rejected, potentially tipping the scales in this swing state. Although it's uncertain whether this decision would determine the 2024 presidential election, Pennsylvania's tight race underscores the possible impact of invalidating votes on a technical basis.
Dueling rallies in Pennsylvania tonight considered a must-win as both sides are after the state's 19 electoral vote.
To begin by asking a very simple question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? November 5th, 2024 will be Liberation Day in America.
Conservative estimates suggest that up to 25,200 ballots could be affected if the GOP prevails, with Democrats more likely to be disadvantaged as they are more likely to use mail-in ballots. Beyond the immediate effects, these legal developments indicate a broader trend in which the Supreme Court may increasingly set precedents that limit voting access, especially for marginalized groups and frequent mail-in voters. The Virginia case and the potential Pennsylvania ruling reveal a court ready to redefine electoral regulations, often in ways that could disenfranchise voters and disproportionately impact certain demographics. If these precedents continue, they may pave the way for further restrictions, reducing Americans' access to voting and influencing the democratic process in the United States for years to come. Election-related litigation. Following the 2020 U.S. presidential election, Donald Trump and his supporters filed numerous lawsuits challenging the election results to overturn the outcome in favor of Joe Biden. Despite a conservative-leaning majority on the Supreme Court, Trump's appeals were largely unsuccessful, leading to the dismissal of the final 3 appeals 4 months after the election. The current election, where Trump faces Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris, could bring about a wave of election-related litigation if Trump loses in a close race. As cases reach the justices, the Supreme Court might face election disputes, particularly regarding mail-in ballots and other contested election protocols. Legal experts caution that the Supreme Court is unlikely to overturn election results, particularly if lower courts have ruled against these challenges. The court's reluctance to intervene could be reinforced by the difficulties challengers face in escalating unsuccessful pre-election claims into substantive post-election litigation. One notable distinction in this election cycle is that the Supreme Court has already provided limited support to Trump's campaign. In March, the justices overturned a Colorado Supreme Court decision that had disqualified him from the state's Republican primary ballot under constitutional provisions regarding insurrection. Furthermore, in July, the court granted him broad immunity from criminal prosecution related to his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results.
Whether former President Donald Trump can be prosecuted on charges he plotted to overturn the 2020 election result.
These are not leftists who brought this lawsuit. These are people who are conservative, who are Republicans.
Republican Party to unite, to come together and focus our energy and resources on beating crooked Joe Biden.
It's far from certain that the Supreme Court will decide now to take up Trump's immunity claims in the election interference case.
Their names, many of them, but they are behind some of the most important and high-profile decisions across our state.
Late last year, they ruled former President Donald Trump was ineligible to appear on the presidential primary ballot. The decision was ultimately struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court in a unanimous vote, but the initial decision made national headlines.
Even so, many legal experts believe that the justices will remain hesitant to interfere with election outcomes, particularly in cases that echo unsuccessful challenges from 2020. This year, federal and state courts have also faced a pre-election surge in litigation, with Democracy Docket, a website monitoring election-related cases, reporting nearly 200 cases across 40 states. The Republican National Committee has initiated dozens of these cases, under the guise of ensuring election integrity, focusing on proper vote counting and preventing unlawful voting. Democrats argue that these cases are setting the stage for Republicans to contest another potential Trump loss, given the past pattern of election-related legal disputes. However, Republican election lawyer Jason Torchinsky expressed doubt that the Supreme Court would influence the election outcome unless the race was exceedingly close, as seen in the 2000 Bush-Gore election, where the justices halted a Florida recount, effectively awarding the presidency to George W. Bush. The Supreme Court and various lower courts have resolved many election-related issues, making it less likely that the court will need to intervene this time. For instance, in Georgia, state courts have addressed numerous pre-election lawsuits and prevented the enforcement of controversial rules that might have obstructed the certification of votes. In addition to these judicial safeguards, Congress passed the bipartisan Electoral Count Reform Act in 2022. This law introduced reforms to the process of certifying election results in Congress to prevent a repeat of the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot, where Trump supporters attempted to stop the certification of Biden's victory. The act is designed to minimize the potential for post-election disputes by clarifying the process of counting electoral votes and certifying results. As Election Day approaches, both Trump and Harris are expected to pursue legal avenues available to them if the election outcome is close. Wendy Weiser, a voting rights expert with NYU's Brennan Center for Justice, noted that while both sides may try to leverage the courts, most scenarios that would invite Supreme Court intervention are legally unlikely and therefore pose minimal risk. However, she cautioned that in certain scenarios, particularly where state rulings are ambiguous, such as in Pennsylvania, a close margin could prompt the Supreme Court to step in. Despite the possibility of some cases reaching the justices, Weiser's primary concern lies not with judicial intervention, but with how ongoing litigation could influence public perception of the election's legitimacy. She expressed concern that the flood of lawsuits could serve to cast doubt on the election results in the public's eye, undermining faith in the electoral process. This strategy of influencing public opinion, she argues, could diminish public trust in the results, particularly if the outcome is close and contested. That's all for this video, folks. We'll see you next time.